Shaq loved to drive. For him, it was a rare moment of solitude, a chance to escape the constant demands of his celebrity life. On this particular day, he was driving his custom electric car, a sleek prototype known as Project Titan. The car was a marvel of engineering, designed with cutting-edge technology and inspired by Shaq's vision of a sustainable future. Its silver body gleamed in the California sun as Shaq cruised down the highway, enjoying the hum of the electric motor and the feel of the open road. Shaquille O'Neal's life was the embodiment of greatness. Born in Newark, New Jersey in 1972, Shaq was raised in a challenging environment. Newark, with its gritty streets and turbulent history, was no easy place to grow up. Yet, his towering height and indomitable spirit made him stand out from the beginning. Raised by his mother, Lucille O'Neal, and later guided by his stepfather, Sergeant Philip Harrison, Shaq learned early the values of discipline, respect, and perseverance. From an early age, basketball became a refuge for him. His size, athleticism, and natural charisma attracted attention, but it was his work ethic and determination that set him apart. By the time he reached high school, Shaq was already a phenomenon. At Louisiana State University, he became an unstoppable force, shattering records and dazzling fans with his combination of power and finesse. His dominance on the court was undeniable, earning him the title of the #1 pick in the 1992 NBA draft. Over the years, Shaq would become one of the most iconic players in NBA history, winning 4 championships, earning 3 Finals MVP awards, and cementing his legacy as one of the greatest centers of all time. But Shaq was more than just an athlete. Off the court, he was a businessman, a philanthropist, and an entertainer. He was larger than life, with a personality as big as his 7'1" frame. Whether it was through his playful sense of humor, his ventures into music and acting, or his commitment to giving back to the community, Shaq left an indelible mark on everyone he met. Yet, for all his fame and fortune, Shaq was acutely aware of the challenges that came with being a black man in America. Despite his achievements, he was not immune to the prejudices and systemic inequalities that plagued society. He often spoke about the duality of his existence, being celebrated as a hero on the basketball court, but still facing moments of discrimination off it. For Shaq, his success was not just about personal glory. It was about using his platform to uplift others, to fight for justice, and to make the world a better place. He had just left a meeting about a new community project he was funding, a state-of-the-art youth center in South Los Angeles. The project was close to Shaq's heart, a way to give back to the community and provide opportunities for kids growing up in circumstances similar to his own. As he drove, he thought about the impact the center would have, the lives it could change. It was moments like these that made him feel truly fulfilled. The tranquility of the afternoon drive was shattered by the sight of flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. A police car was tailing him, its siren blaring. Shaq's chest tightened. Despite his fame, despite his larger-than-life persona, Shaq was not immune to the anxiety that came with being pulled over by the police. He had seen too many stories, heard too many accounts of black men being harassed, mistreated, or worse, during routine traffic stops. He pulled over to the side of the road, his hands steady on the wheel, his mind racing. The officer who stepped out of the patrol car was a man named Nelson Morrison. Morrison was notorious within the department and the community for his aggressive behavior and unchecked biases. He had built a career on intimidation, targeting those he perceived as vulnerable, and abusing the power of his badge. Morrison's reputation preceded him, but he had managed to avoid accountability, protected by a culture of silence within the force. Morrison approached the car with a swagger, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of Shaq's futuristic vehicle. He didn't seem to recognize the driver at first, or perhaps he didn't care. For Morrison, Shaq was just another black man in an expensive car, a target. Shaq handed over his license and registration without protest, his massive hands dwarfing the documents. Morrison barely glanced at them before demanding that Shaq step out of the car. A dangerous encounter. Shaq exited the car, his towering frame unfolding like a mountain rising from the ground. Even outside of the basketball court, his size was awe-inspiring, yet it did little to deter Morrison. The officer's demeanor was hostile, his voice sharp as he ordered Shaq to open the trunk. Shaq complied, his face calm but his mind alert. The trunk contained sensitive equipment for the car's AI system, a prototype that was still under development. The technology was not only valuable, but also confidential. Morrison rummaged through the trunk with a mixture of curiosity and aggression, tossing items aside carelessly. Shaq's heart sank as he watched the officer handle the equipment with no regard for its value or purpose. He felt a wave of frustration rise within him. This wasn't about enforcing the law. This was about power, about control, about a man abusing his authority to demean and intimidate. Unbeknownst to either of them, a witness was watching the scene unfold from a distance. Natalie Peters, a sergeant in the same precinct as Morrison, had been driving home when she noticed the patrol car tailing Shaq's vehicle. Something about the situation didn't sit right with her. She knew Morrison's reputation all too well. He was a man who operated with impunity, preying on those who lacked the means or the platform to fight back. But this time was different. This time Morrison had picked the wrong target. Peters pulled her car over and began recording the encounter on her phone. She watched as Morrison continued to search the trunk, his frustration growing as he failed to find anything incriminating. She saw Shaq standing by the side of the road, his massive frame a stark contrast to the vulnerability in his eyes. It was a moment that encapsulated the reality of being black in America. No amount of success, no level of fame, could shield you from the prejudice and systemic racism embedded in society. The unraveling. As Morrison's search came up empty, his frustration turned to anger. He slammed the trunk shut, the sound echoing across the empty road. He turned to face Shaq, his hand resting on the holster of his gun. The tension in the air was palpable, the situation teetering on the edge of escalation. Peters gripped her phone tightly, her heart pounding as she prepared to intervene if necessary. Morrison's tirade was cut short by the sound of approaching sirens. Peters had called for backup, unwilling to let the situation spiral out of control. When the additional officers arrived, they were greeted by the sight of Shaq standing beside his car, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Morrison's agitated state. Peters stepped forward, her phone still recording, and identified herself to the responding officers. She explained what she had witnessed, presenting her footage as evidence. The other officers seemed hesitant at first, unsure of how to handle the situation, but Peters was resolute. She knew that Morrison's actions had crossed the line, and she was determined to hold him accountable. The aftermath of the encounter. The buzzing sound of the patrol car pulling away faded into the distance, leaving Shaquille O'Neal standing by the side of the road. The tension in the air lingered like a storm cloud, but there was also a sense of quiet relief. Shaq's massive frame, which had seemed so mighty moments earlier, now felt heavy under the weight of what had just occurred. His hands rested on his hips as he took slow, deliberate breaths, trying to center himself after the intense confrontation. He glanced at the now closed trunk of his custom electric car, Project Titan. The thought of what might have been damaged inside churned in his mind. The prototype equipment stored there represented months of collaboration and investment. It wasn't just technology, it was the future of his vision for innovation, sustainability, and progress. And yet, the officer's actions had demonstrated how little respect Morrison had for Shaq's property, his work, or even his humanity. Shaq's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car door opening nearby. Turning, he saw Sergeant Natalie Peters approaching him, her phone still clutched in her hand. She stepped out of her vehicle with a sense of purpose, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. For a moment, Shaq felt uncertain. Another officer? But then he noticed the subtle nod of reassurance in her expression, and his anxiety began to ease. A witness to injustice. Sergeant Peters had been watching the scene unfold from a safe distance, her years of experience telling her that this wasn't an ordinary traffic stop. She had known Officer Morrison for years, and his reputation for abusing his power was no secret. Peters had seen enough of his behavior to know that this incident was just another example of his unchecked authority. But this time, she wasn't just a bystander. She had recorded everything. She approached Shaq with quiet confidence, introducing herself and explaining what she had witnessed. She let him know that the entire encounter, from Morrison's unwarranted stop to his reckless behavior with Shaq's property, had been captured on video. Shaq listened, a mixture of gratitude and frustration washing over him. Gratitude that someone had been there to see the truth, and frustration that it had to happen at all. Peters assured him that she would use her position within the department to ensure that Morrison's actions were investigated thoroughly. She explained that she had already contacted her superiors to report the incident and submit the video evidence. For too long, Morrison had operated without consequences, but this time, things would be different. The viral outcry. The video Peters had recorded found its way onto social media within hours. It quickly went viral, spreading like wildfire across platforms and news outlets. The footage was shocking. A beloved cultural icon like Shaquille O'Neal being subjected to racial profiling and harassment during a routine traffic stop. The public was outraged. Fans, activists, and community leaders alike condemned the incident, calling for accountability and justice. The video ignited a national conversation about systemic racism and police misconduct. It wasn't just about Shaq. It was about the countless others who had faced similar injustices without the platform or resources to fight back. The footage became a symbol of the broader issues that plagued society, a stark reminder that fame and fortune offered no immunity from prejudice. As the video circulated, the public demanded answers. Pressure mounted on the police department to take immediate action. Protests erupted in cities across the country, with demonstrators carrying signs that read, "Justice for all" and "End police abuse." The momentum was unstoppable. Justice and redemption redemption. The footage Peters captured went viral within hours, sparking outrage across the nation. The sight of Shaquille O'Neal, a beloved figure, a role model, being subjected to such treatment struck a chord with people from all walks of life. The incident became a rallying cry for justice, a stark reminder of the systemic issues that still plagued society. Morrison was suspended pending an investigation, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. His career, which had been built on a foundation of intimidation and abuse, came crashing down. For Shaq, the incident was a painful reminder of the work that still needed to be done. But instead of retreating, he used the experience as a catalyst for change. In collaboration with Peters, Shaq launched a nationwide campaign against police misconduct, using his platform to amplify the voices of those who had been silenced. The campaign included community outreach programs, educational initiatives, and a documentary that shone a light on the stories of those who had faced similar injustices. Shaq also used the incident as an opportunity to promote unity and accountability within law enforcement. He worked with police departments across the country to implement reforms and foster better relationships between officers and the communities they served. It was a cause that resonated deeply with him, a way to honor the lessons he had learned from his stepfather, a man who had dedicated his life to serving and protecting others with integrity. Morrison's downfall. Within days, the police department announced that Officer Nelson Morrison had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. As more details about his history of misconduct came to light, it became clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. Community members began to share their own stories of harassment and intimidation at Morrison's hands, painting a damning picture of a man who had used his badge as a shield for corruption. The department, under immense public scrutiny, acted swiftly. Morrison was formally charged with misconduct, and his badge was revoked. The once arrogant officer now faced a very different reality, one of accountability. As news of his dismissal spread, the community he had terrorized for so long began to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Justice, it seemed, was finally catching up with him. Shaq's response. For Shaquille O'Neal, the incident was a deeply personal reminder of the challenges that black men in America continued to face, regardless of their achievements or status. But Shaq was not one to dwell in anger or despair. Instead, he saw an opportunity to turn his experience into a force for good. He knew that his platform gave him a unique ability to inspire change, and he was determined to use it. In the days following the incident, Shaq released a statement to the public. In it, he spoke candidly about his experience, the emotions it had stirred, and the broader implications of what had occurred. He called for unity, accountability, and action, not just from law enforcement, but from society as a whole. Shaq's words resonated deeply, sparking conversations across the nation. But he didn't stop there. He began reaching out to community leaders, activists, and organizations dedicated to criminal justice reform. Together, they began to develop a plan to address the systemic issues that had allowed misconduct like Morrison's to persist. The Justice for All Initiative. Out of this collaboration was born the Justice for All Initiative, a nationwide campaign aimed at promoting accountability, transparency, and equity in law enforcement. The initiative focused on three key pillars: lobbying for legislative changes to address systemic issues within the justice system. This included advocating for mandatory body cameras, independent investigations of police misconduct, and the establishment of civilian oversight boards, hosting town hall meetings, workshops, and forums to foster dialogue between law enforcement and the communities they served. These events emphasized the importance of building trust, understanding, and mutual respect, creating programs to educate citizens about their rights, provide legal aid to victims of police misconduct, and support grassroots movements dedicated to social justice. Shaq became the face of the initiative, using his fame and influence to amplify its message. His involvement brought widespread attention to the cause, drawing support from celebrities, politicians, and everyday citizens alike. The movement quickly gained momentum, becoming a beacon of hope for those who believed in the possibility of a more just and equitable society. A new chapter. As the Justice for All initiative grew, Shaquille O'Neal's efforts extended far beyond advocacy, evolving into a full-scale movement for systemic reform. Shaq, with his characteristic determination and commitment, worked tirelessly to ensure the initiative was not just a fleeting reaction to injustice, but a long-term solution to the deep-seated problems in law enforcement and societal inequities. One of the first major steps was partnering with police departments across the country to implement training programs focused on de-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity, and addressing implicit bias. Shaq recognized that systemic change had to start with those on the front lines, police officers themselves. His approach was not one of condemnation, but collaboration. He wanted to foster an environment where officers were better equipped to serve their communities with integrity and compassion. These programs went beyond surface-level training, incorporating community engagement exercises, role-playing scenarios, and workshops led by experts in sociology and criminal justice reform. Shaq's reputation as a beloved public figure opened doors doors that others might not have been able to access. Police chiefs invited him to speak at academies, lawmakers listened when he advocated for mandatory reforms, and communities trusted his intentions. His presence gave the initiative credibility and visibility, but it was his sincerity and hands-on approach that truly set it apart. Shaq himself attended several of the training sessions, standing shoulder to shoulder with officers as they worked to unlearn the biases that had been ingrained in the system for decades. In tandem with this work, Shaq collaborated with Sergeant Natalie Peters to produce a groundbreaking documentary titled Unstoppable: The Fight for Justice. The film chronicled Shaq's journey from the harrowing traffic stop to the creation and expansion of the Justice for All initiative. It didn't just focus on Shaq's experience, it told the stories of victims of police misconduct, highlighted the voices of activists fighting for change, and even included interviews with law enforcement officials who were committed to reform within their ranks. The documentary offered a nuanced view of the complexities of systemic injustice while also shining a light on the solutions being implemented through the initiative. It was a call to action, urging viewers to take part in creating a more equitable and just society. The film premiered at several major festivals, earning widespread critical acclaim for its raw honesty and emotional depth. Audiences were moved to tears by the personal stories and inspired to act by Shaq's unwavering resolve. A lasting legacy. For Shaquille O'Neal, the incident on that quiet Los Angeles road was more than just a moment of injustice. It became the spark that ignited a fire for change. It reminded Shaq of a harsh truth he had long understood. Even for someone of his stature, fame, and influence, the weight of systemic racism could not be escaped. The experience was a painful revelation, but it also served as a powerful catalyst, pushing him to use his voice, his platform, and his resources to make a difference. The Justice for All initiative, born from this encounter, quickly grew into a national movement. What started as a response to a single incident of police misconduct soon became a beacon of hope for communities facing inequality and discrimination. The initiative worked to address the systemic issues that allowed officers like Nelson Morrison to abuse their power unchecked. It wasn't enough to focus on accountability after the fact. Shaq and his collaborators sought to shape a future where such injustices could be prevented entirely. The initiative's three pillars, policy reform, education, and community engagement, drove its success. Shaq personally lobbied lawmakers to pass bills mandating the use of body cameras, independent investigations of police misconduct, and the establishment of civilian oversight committees in precincts nationwide. These reforms aimed to bring transparency to a system that had long operated in shadows, shining a light on practices that disproportionately affected marginalized communities. Education was another cornerstone of the movement. Shaq partnered with universities, nonprofits, and police departments to create training programs that focused on de-escalation, implicit bias, and cultural sensitivity. These workshops emphasized building trust between law enforcement and the communities they served, fostering dialogue and understanding where division had taken root. Shaq's immense influence and charisma made him a natural leader in these efforts, and his involvement inspired others to join the cause. Community engagement, however, was where Shaq's heart truly lay. He spearheaded the creation of youth mentorship programs, neighborhood forums, and resource hubs that empowered individuals to advocate for their rights and hold local authorities accountable. Shaq knew that change couldn't come from legislation alone. It had to start from the ground up, with people working together to create a more just and equitable society. As the Justice for All initiative gained momentum, Shaq became a symbol of resilience and determination. The documentary, Unstoppable: The Fight for Justice, chronicled his journey from the roadside encounter to the nationwide movement that followed. Featuring interviews with victims of police misconduct, activists, and law enforcement officials, the film highlighted the complexities of systemic racism while offering a vision of hope and progress. Proceeds from the documentary were donated to organizations dedicated to criminal justice reform, legal aid, and community empowerment. In the years that followed, Shaq continued to champion the cause of justice and equality. He remained a towering figure both physically and morally, a reminder that courage and perseverance could drive meaningful change. His story became an enduring testament to the power of taking action, no matter how daunting the challenge. Though the road ahead was long, Shaquille O'Neal walked it with the same determination he had shown on the basketball court, proving once again that he was unstoppable.